What is up, everyone? Brandon Ferst, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome into another edition of In the Paint here on the network. We break down everything that college basketball has to offer. With me, as always, is my co-host, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing today, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing great. The sun's out, a little cool outside, but it is almost March, and I'm polishing up my dancing shoes.
Yeah. The one good thing about waiting for March Madness is right before it, you literally have the shortest month. So I guess, if you want to look at it that way, all we have to do is get through February. Well, we're almost there. And the first, I think, kind of big reminder, similar to, I think, for college football, is it's not till like week 10, week 11 that they come out with the quote unquote rankings, the college football rankings. And those are the ones that really matter. And kind of the same thing here in college basketball. We can talk about the AP top 25 all until we're red in the face. But guess what? In March, and when it's time to really break things down, the only number next to your name is that 1 through 16, where you're seated. And of course, the NCAA selection committee dropped their top 16. So essentially their top 4 seeds for each region. Feel free to go check those out, just a Google search away. But Raider Jim, I sent this over to you. I know I sent some thoughts that, wow, some teams were definitely higher than expected and lower than expected. What were your initial thoughts? Obviously, Gonzaga at the top had to make you feel good. But what were your thoughts overall on the NCAA 16, if you will?
I don't see any real surprises. I think where we're going to move is Houston's really got to think if they want to stay in that top 16. And if they end up losing the conference, and if they end up losing the conference tournament, which is very, very plausible at this point in time, is going to spell a little bit of a problem, or create a little bit of a problem for that program. And again, I think the other one, you've got to scratch your look. I understand North Carolina is rebuilding, so you don't really expect much out of them after the season they've had. But when you look at Izzo and his boys, and to see that they've even dropped out of the top 25, that's just not something you see in February, not at this point in time. So that one makes me wonder. But overall, I'm pretty much in agreement. Nice to see Tommy Lloyd and the boys up there from Arizona in the number 2 spot. Not surprising, and as long as they hang on and take care of business, you're going to see Mark Few and one of his proteges at the top 2 spots. And I think, what a feather in the cap to the West Coast Conference and to Coach Few.
I agree. Great stuff there from Arizona. We've seen. I'm very surprised to see Providence down at 15. I think they're low. I know they did lose to Villanova. Villanova's a really good team as well. They're, I think, up 8 or 9. But Providence, and this came out before last night's game. I was really impressed with Providence last night. There were a couple times against Xavier they probably should have lost that game. They ended up getting it done in triple overtime. And I know Xavier isn't, David West Xavier, or the Thad Matas of that time. No, not that. But this is still a good team, and they were pushed. And I think a lot of people are expecting Providence to kind of fold. We haven't seen that. And the one team I think is a little higher than I would expect would be Baylor. They're at the 5 spot right now. Yes. You're telling me that they are one slip up away from another team of being a 1 seed. And I don't know. I will say Texas Tech, I was very surprised to see. I mean, obviously they need to be in there. But I was surprised to see how high they were. And then I realized they have 6 wins over teams that are on this list. The next closest is 3, I think, of another team that's won that many against this. So Texas Tech has been there, done that. Illinois, I think, right where they should be. But I agree. I think for the most part, we're looking good. It is a little interesting to me for Auburn. I don't know if it's just locked in that the 1 seed goes immediately out west, or the number 1 overall seed and the number 2 goes to the Midwest. But I feel like, Arizona and Auburn, because right now Arizona would be the 1 seed in the South and Auburn would be the 1 seed in the Midwest. I feel like regionally, you flip-flop those. Arizona, I know technically isn't Midwest, but but Auburn certainly is not Midwest. So I don't know if that's just locked in, but little ticky tack for me there. But I think overall, it's nice to see this. I think we all kind of see where the selection committees, what they're valuing, how they're going to grade things overall. And to be honest, if I'm Providence, you got to look around and go, okay, we might not be able to lose another game, or we might fall to a 5 or 6 seed at this point, because I don't think they're favoring them too heavily, I should say. So moving on to some other drama that happened.
And to your point,
yes.
To your point, when you spoke about Baylor, are they really deserving of the number 5 spot? Even going down to the number 16 team, Texas, they have not been gangbusters this year, but it's the committee. Last week, if you put the International Olympic Committee in charge, anything can happen. And sometimes that's what this is like when you watch what comes out on Selection Sunday. It's at 16, kind of questioning, puzzling to me, but and again, this is one writer's possible 16, or this is their what do I want to say? Their early picks of the 16 that the writers are put. That's going to change over the next 2 weeks because of conference play wrapping up, because of conference tournaments. Anything could happen.
I agree, and it's also, look, this is also a rough draft, right? You don't spend 3 hours polishing out your rough draft. This is a couple phone calls. Hey, what do you think here? What do you think there? Okay, send me your little thing. We'll add some things up. This isn't the war room on Selection Sunday. This isn't 25 guys. Okay, carry the 4. It's, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not really gonna. Okay, if you think Baylor's there, that's cool. Whatever. Like you said, it's nothing set in stone. And really, if anything, I think it wakens a lot of teams that like Providence, feel maybe they're lower, or other teams that went, hey, where are we? Why aren't we on there? Well, time to get rolling. Now you know where you kind of stand with the committee. So moving on to that aforementioned drama out of the Big Ten. And, just a few years ago, Juwan Howard was, one of the top coaches coaching talked about. I think he was talked about for the Pistons job at one point. And then, of course, we had the incident. Michigan's had a bit of a down year this year. No doubt about it, a tough conference, the resurgence of Michigan State. But what happened this past Saturday or Sunday, I forget when it was a bit of a black eye for the school. Pun may be included there, I'm not sure. But yeah, Juwan Howard, I don't know if it was a right hand like the announcer said, but it was certainly enough to get attention. It was, if at very least, it was an aggressive pushback. But I'm sure there were some words said, things like that. Juwan Howard did take exception to Greg Gard's late timeout. I believe there were about 20 seconds left. Michigan was pressing in the half court. They had the backups in, and Greg Gard, he had to get another inbound with only 4 seconds. If you take a timeout, you can reset the half court line, or I forget whatever it is, the over and back time can go back up to 10 seconds. He didn't want his backups to do it. Look, I don't know. Whatever, it is what it is, but I don't think the result was worth the, let's call it, cheeky play there from Greg Gard. But Raider Jim, what were your thoughts on the unfortunate situation we saw this past weekend in Madison?
Agree or disagree with the Bush League, or what some might think is the Bush League timeout call with 4 seconds left and you're well in control of that game? When you are the head coach of a professional team, of a high school team, of a college team, to me, if I'm the athletic director, the one thing I want is somebody in that position of character and who is going to lead by example. And that is not what happened. He is a star in his own right. For him to conduct himself in such a manner in front of these kids, even if my kid was being recruited by and not wined and dined by Michigan right now, I don't know if I might not reconsider, because you can't just give a stuff like this. And again, penalty for the consequence for the action was suspending him for the rest of conference play. Enough. I guess so. You know, here 1 week, 2 weeks of play, he's going to miss 3 games, maybe something like that. He'll be back for the conference. But a program that is already struggling this year, they have not played up to any great potential. And for him to, it almost makes him look like a loser. And that's the last thing you want. You don't want to be led by someone about that mentality. So just all the way around, just bad for the program, bad look for him as well. And especially more a bad look for him.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I think it ended up being 5 games. Obviously, you always knock on wood in this time, but as of right now, it would be 5 games he would miss heading into that tournament. And to be honest, look, normally, you lose your head coach, you'd expect some sort of, kind of fallback. But look, they got Phil Martelli on that staff who's going to step in. Obviously, the Philly people will remember him from his time at St. Joe's. A really good coach to step in. I think they got the win over Rutgers last night, kind of the answer to that. This is an issue, though, for Juwan Howard. I think going forward, his seat wasn't exactly cool early. And this would be a very easy out for Michigan. There are a lot of times when you bring in Juwan Howard, was probably, I would say, the second, best player out of that Fab Five. Obviously, you had Chris Webber doing his thing, but Juwan Howard is a Michigan legend. It was always going to be, I don't want to say difficult, but it would take a lot more for Juwan Howard to get fired than, say, some other, or Phil Martelli, for example, someone who doesn't really have ties to the program. Well, now, you can sit here and say, hey, our hands are tied. We love Juwan, but what went down, that can't happen. And you don't see that too often. Normally, when we see something like that happen, it's the 20-year-olds who start it, right? And it's the emotion. And in that situation, it's the 20-year-olds who are the peacekeepers. They're the ones looking around going, what is going on? I mean, they're the ones that you watch the players around and you can almost see him going, wait, is he really talking to him like that? Did he really stick his finger in his face? And, I don't, like I said, whether a timeout was called or what was said, it doesn't matter. And we can talk for days about whether or not he was touched first. It doesn't matter. All that matters is what we saw. Juwan Howard threw what we all expect to be the first blow, whatever that was. I'm not going to call it a punch, but I'm not going to call it a high five. This is Juwan Howard's pressure being just ratcheted up. And now knowing that not only is Michigan going into the conference tournament, maybe with their tournament hopes on the line, but Juwan Howard's got to feel like he's coaching for his job. And even that might not be enough when it's all said and done. I think the big question now, if they do fire him after this, is why didn't they do this immediately? As far as I know, there's no more investigation going into it. So we'll see how this goes.
They are not, it's not as if the program is pending a high seeding going into March Madness. And I agree with you 110%. Let's just do it now, cut our losses and make of the rest of the season. And who knows, maybe it would have been enough to ignite this team and get them to play at a different level. I mean, it can go either way. It can also psychologically take a team, oh my God, or coach, where's coach? It could go either way, but I'm with you. Let's not, is this a distraction out in the locker room? Are they talking about amongst themselves? Or are the parents talking? Or, is everybody concerned? Where is the destiny? Nobody knows. Just a mess. He really a mess.
Well, and the way March, rolls around and things like that, we always seem to get that, I don't want to call it not storybook, but one of those like, wow, who's writing this? We're going into Indianapolis, the Big Ten tournament. I would say there's probably a pretty good chance Michigan faces Wisconsin again. And then what? We're not talking about Hunter Dickinson versus the Wisconsin Badgers. We're talking about what will happen at the handshake line. What will happen if this happens? That right there, already the distraction. And you hit the nail on the head earlier as well. The recruiting. Recruiting in the Big Ten, really anywhere, is cutthroat. Right. And you can't miss a beat. This right here, even if you do decide, you know what, we're cutting our ties with Juwan Howard at the end of the season, we're now talking about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month, where that is the head coach and you're still trying to get players in, going in, like you said, sitting across from from a mother or father saying, I'm going to teach your son how to be a man for these 4 years I have him. Well, what happened the other day? Just because somebody called. So there's a lot of things that have to be figured out for Michigan. But at the end of the day, Juwan Howard done for the regular season. Phil Martelli steps in the conference tournament. We'll be back in Juwan Howard's lap, but we'll see how long for that. So moving on to our player spotlight, we're going to stay in the Big Ten, and kind of similar to when we talked about the Auburn freshman a few weeks ago, I was trying to think, how can I find a player we haven't talked about? And there's been a team that has been kind of taking at least the podcast over for the last 3 weeks, and it's Rutgers. Rutgers, they did lose last night to Michigan, but it seems like every time they get matched up with a ranked team, they get the job done. And who is this? Who's carrying this team? And of course, then I realized I've known all along. It's Ron Harper Jr. Yes, you do remember the name Ron Harper Sr. One of the few, I want to say I know for a fact he was a part of the Bulls dynasty. I feel like he might have been there for a couple of the Laker, Kobe, Shaq dynasties, but don't quote me on that. But Ron Harper was a fantastic, three-point shooter in his own right. Ron Harper Jr. doing fantastic stuff for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, having maybe one of their best seasons in recent memory. Like I said, they haven't been terribly consistent. They're probably going to be pretty low if they do make the tournament, but they've had a lot of, big time upsets. But for Ron Harper Jr., Raider Jim, the senior guard out of Rutgers, what are your thoughts?
They had a run there for a while, and then Purdue was having none of it last week. That would have been the big one. That one would have pushed them over the edge because they had beaten 4 ranked teams. And what I referred to it last week is the first game in February, they actually lost to Northwestern, who at that point in time, Western had only won 2 conference games. And you lose that, you're just setting yourself up to be the sparring partner for everybody the rest of the season. And Aaron said, no, we want a shot at the title. They went out, rattled off 4 wins in a row against ranked opponents, giving them 6 quad 1 wins against 3 losses, looking great. And then, like I say, they kind of came back down to last week when they went on the road and played Purdue. Then again, they dropped another one, so they're kind of back where they belong. But a big part of their success is Ron Harper Jr. You're absolutely right. His dad played for the Lakers, and here's an interesting thing: played for the Lakers, so of course he's got that genetic strain within him. He was actually coached a lot by his mom when he was growing up. So his mom played a big impact on how he learned to play the game, which is kind of interesting. And what do you say about what he's done? This kid has started in about 90% of the games that he's been around for Rutgers. He's averaging this year 15.7 points. He's shooting at 43%, 39 from the 3-point line. He gets 6 rebounds a game, and he's 80% from the free throw. 6'6", 245, not a bad size. He's not giant, but he can handle the ball, and he does have that shooting touch. Needs to sharpen it up a little bit. I don't know. I know he did play. I assume his hand is healed because he did hurt it in the Illinois game last week. But wow, I think he's a great player, and he's really led this team and done well.
Yeah, I agree with you. The size I really like. I really like the size. I'd like to see the assist numbers improve, but look, he's more of that 2 guard, and great rebound. He's, I think, averaging over 6 rebounds. That, obviously at the next level, which I do think he has I don't know if he's going to have a, career his dad did. But one of the best things I loved about Ron Harper, and he reminded me a lot of, Nick Van Exel, and that's they find that, look, I know what I'm going to be. I'm going to chill on the perimeter when Michael or Kobe are covered and they pass it to me. It's my job to knock down a 3. And I think that's kind of this, Ron Harper Jr.'s kind of right up his alley. But the one thing that I think he has more than his father is this size and athleticism. I've been really, really impressed to see him, just kind of watching the highlights. Moves well for someone. He doesn't look 245. I'll tell you that. He looks big, but he doesn't look 245 at 6'6". And for Rutgers, this is, let's be honest, this is not a sports school. I'm racking my head trying to think. I'm sure there is a sport that they do excel in or are good at. My own ignorance, I don't know what it is. But for Rutgers to kind of put this season together, and like I said, they've come back to earth. They probably are working their way back towards a bubble team, unfortunately. But that can all change. That's the one good thing about being in the Big Ten. It only takes a 4-game winning streak against 4 ranked teams. I mean, that's kind of what you got to do to compete anyway. But Ron Harper Jr. has been a big part of it. I'm a big fan of progression, and he's progressed in pretty much every part of his game. The free throw percentage, I'm a stickler for that, so I'd like to see that improve a little more. But when you're sniffing, 40% from behind the arc, averaging, I think it was 16 a game. Where is it? I lost it already, but there it is. Okay, 15.7 points per game. So we'll round that up to 16 and give him the nod on that one. He's had a good year, and we'll talk about that, San Diego State here in a bit in terms of a player carrying a team. And eventually it kind of wears on them, and it takes a toll on their game. That hasn't really happened with Ron Harper Jr. We'll knock on wood for him there. So congrats to him. He's kept it together, and he's the definite leader of that team. We're really excited to see what they can do heading into March. I don't think a whole lot of Big Ten teams want to play the Rutgers come tournament time. So good luck to him. And he is a senior, so he's a 4-year starter there. So he's going to be heading hopefully to the league next year. I'm sure he'll have some draft night exposure. So we'll see how that goes. But moving on to the Gonzaga and West Coast Conference report, of course, with Raider Jim. We talked earlier about Gonzaga. They were the number 1 overall seed in that NCAA top 16, right where they've pretty much been, it seems like, for the greater portion of the last 2 years. But Raider Jim, it's time for you all to fill us all in on all the blanks for the West Coast Conference and what's going on up in Spokane.
Yeah, well, what do you say about Gonzaga? They finally, they are putting together probably one of the best years they have had, even considering last year when they were undefeated for so long, until that very end of the game that really mattered, though it came down to the 1-game season, and that was the game they lost. But you look at the depth on this team, and I've said it week in and week out, they've got 5 guys in double figures, and guys that came out of nowhere. Nobody expected Rasir Bolton to be one of these guys that was going to average double figures. And he is playing like a senior should play. He knows this is it, and he's coming after it. So is Andrew Nembhard. Now, Nembhard is probably, this could be one of those, I'm going to do it for the family, because his brother plays for Creighton, hot freshman over there, and he is out now for the rest of the season because he busted his elbow or his hand or something just last night. Very, very sad picture of him on the front page of CBSSports.com. So there's a little addition, not like you need to give Andrew Nembhard any motivation, but there is some. Julian Strother, and I'm working my way from the bottom up to the top. You got to get to through Bolton, Nembhard, Strother, and then you come into Chet Holmgren, the freshman phenom. You come into Drew Timme, who led them last year. He's leading them again this year, and hopefully he may be back next year too. They've got 2 games left to sweep the conference play. They play tonight against the USF Dons. They play Saturday, the final game of the conference play at St. Mary's. St. Mary's is going to be in San Diego tonight, a game that I was going to go to, but I just don't want to leave my sofa. So I'm going to stay home and watch the Zags on ESPN2. Really, there is nothing to stop Gonzaga from winning the West Coast tournament. They should be an automatic into the semifinal round, of course. Now, my question still is, have the San Francisco Dons really played strong enough to earn that 3rd position in the tournament? Probably, and it's tough because you look at the Mountain West Conference, which you'll touch on. I think if they make it in, it's going to really depend on not only how play these next two games, but how well they fare in the tournament. If they get into that tournament for the West Coast Conference and absolutely melt down and don't advance, then I think might be the playing game at best.
Yeah, for USF, you kind of brought it up. It's that you got to get to the championship game. Obviously, would be assumed against Gonzaga, and if that is the case, you have to. I don't think you have to win that game, but you got to keep it within 5. It has to come down to the last minute, and we're talking about timeouts. We're talking about strategy. It has to be, like I said, USF doesn't need to beat Gonzaga. Obviously, that would solve a lot of their issues, right? Because then they're in immediately. But if they're in that game, they win out, outside of the Gonzaga game, of course, but they win out, and then they perform well against Gonzaga. Maybe get some help other ways with some other teams dying out early, or maybe a Rutgers or a Michigan dropping out in the first round of their tournament. Correct. So their bubble gets burst. They're probably, best case scenario, going to need some help. But I think for San Francisco and really the West Coast Conference, don't sleep on St. Mary's either. But I agree with you. I think San Francisco is the best chance to get into that. As to be the second for the West Coast Conference. But for Gonzaga, I agree with you. I mean, it's crazy. I feel like a lot of the country might be sleeping on Gonzaga, even though they are the number 1 team in the country. But the fact, because, Gonzaga lost to 2 games this year, well, whatever. We're not going to have to worry about them. Of course, they'll win every game in their conference tournament, but, it's just the lowly West Coast Conference. Of course, that East Coast mindset. I think Gonzaga, you named off those 3 players, and the whole time I'm going, and we haven't even got to the best freshman in the country, and we haven't even got to the best big man in the country in Timmy and Holmgren. So for Gonzaga, it's all going to come down to that March date and how they get it done. Obviously, I think everyone expects a Final Four trip, and then, hopefully they can get it done. But I expect to see Gonzaga in the championship, and I really do think this is the year they do break through. I just think they have too much size and athleticism experience. But once again, it's 40 minutes in March. Anything can happen. You got to play your best every single night. So
right,
we'll see how that goes.
And I mentioned Rasheer Bolton, who was averaging 10 points a game right now, and so he's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You go beyond 5. I didn't even touch on the names Nolan Hickman, Anton Watson, and Watson is a defensive maniac and throws out assists, in double figures with regularity. And then Hunter Salas, this guard who comes in, who plays amazing defense. You bring him in, so they are 8 deep, easily 8 deep. And Hunter Salas also, if you watch at least once a game, somehow he breaks free and somebody throws, all of a sudden he's elbows up over the rim and jamming the ball. So this is one dangerously deep team.
Yeah. And they're not stubbing their toes either. They're getting the job done. They're taking care of their business. They can't control, the other teams in the West Coast Conference. They would love to see, USF have been more consistent, and St. Mary's a little more as well. But they can't control that. They can't control that Portland isn't great and Pacific is in their conference. It's just part of it. But they can go out and beat everybody by 50. I mean, it's not great for the rest of the conference. But I think overall, for the West Coast Conference as a whole, if Gonzaga can win a national championship, that would be massive for the conference.
Absolutely.
If it is just, hey, we're a part of that, or, they beat up on us, but you know what? We get to play them. Not a whole lot of mid-majors conferences get a chance to kind of go after a national power once a year at home, like the West Coast Conference teams do. So now it is my turn, of course, to check things out with San Diego State basketball and the Mountain West Conference. And my goodness, folks, San Diego State, it's been a tough year. Obviously, it started, relatively well. They had a rough one against BYU early on. They struggled against USC, and then they seemed to get things going, and then they had a bit of a COVID hiccup, and then they've just struggled. They get the job done over Fresno State in Fresno, and I think the biggest, plus or the brownie point, because look, Fresno State's not that great. They always play San Diego State tough, but Fresno State, that's not a defining win or anything. One of the best parts about it, Matt Bradley, not great for him only to put in 2 points, but for San Diego State to win that game, that's huge. Now, I talked earlier, Ron Harper Jr. carrying the team, blah, 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 and it hasn't really had him affect him. Unfortunately for Matt Bradley, the 2 points might have been the better of the 2 games, because the Boise State game at Viejas Boise, that was a tough one. San Diego State scores more than 55 points or 37 points when they lost at home. But, however, they have an opportunity to win the game. They're up 1 late. An air ball comes in from Boise. I forget the gentleman's name, but he's been there forever, and he's one of their more clutch shooters. But the air ball comes in. Matt Bradley's there for the rebound. Automatic foul. All he's got to do is knock down these 2 free throws. San Diego State's up by 3 with 5 seconds to go. I don't quite remember it, but and then clank, clank. Matt Bradley misses both free throws. And then, as we've seen so many times in college basketball, only down 1 with a short clock. Boise State does not call a timeout, kind of scramble mode. Was it a foul? Was it not a foul? Look, there was contact. When there's contact in basketball, more than likely the whistle's going to be blown. It's late in the game. They say let them play. Late in the year, or earlier this year against Colorado State, Matt Bradley was fouled late. They didn't call it. I can sit here and say it was a terrible call, and it may have been. Once again, it was knee on knee, and it looked a little self-imposed. But if Matt Bradley makes both of those free throws, then San Diego State wins that game, or at very least is heading to overtime. Now, let me also preface this by saying this isn't on Matt Bradley. This is on the rest of the team, even with Mensa, 13-11 against Boise. I mean, that might be a career night for Mensa. That's something I've been screaming, like this guy is double worthy. But it's all the other players. They've relied on Matt Bradley so much that I really do believe. I mean, look, he shot 12% against Fresno State. I don't think he was in double figures against Boise. It's beginning to catch up to Matt Bradley. It's that back brace is wore out. You know, we all have those people, if we worked in, manual labor, that one guy who has that back brace from like 1976. And it's like, dude, get a new one. Nope, it's Old Reliable. Well, unfortunately, Old Reliable is officially, not supporting that back. And for San Diego State, there is no doubt now. It is conference championship or bust. There is no other route. There is no, win out and maybe look good. Nope. You have to get an automatic qualifier. And I'll be honest with you, San Diego State might be an NIT bubble team. Now, looking at overall for the Mountain West, Boise State continues to set the tone. They're 13-2. They're going to have a huge matchup, pretty much kind of determine the Mountain West champion. It'll be Boise against Wyoming. I think I have that one right. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, I take that back. It was San Diego State and Wyoming. But those two, I'm sure, will probably be meeting one more time in the conference tournament. We have Colorado State having another really good year. They are 12-4. And then San Diego State 9-4 in the conference. UNLV's won 3 in a row. And if San Diego State doesn't watch themselves, San Diego State's going to actually fall behind UNLV. But for San Diego State, it's, you got to win out. And that includes the tournament, the conference tournament. And I don't think it's possible. I think this team is starting to show signs, or at least the only player on this team that's done anything really all season. Like I said, he's starting to kind of fatigue, and you can't really blame him. Hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully he comes out and goes back to scoring 27, 28 a game. But it was a rough week for Matt Bradley. And I think a lot of it was imposed by his teammates. A lot of it was just the entire season catching up to Matt Bradley in terms of, guys, I can't do it all myself. And he unfortunately was put in that position. And once again, when the game is on the line and Matt Bradley is on the free throw line, I think San Diego State's going to feel real good about their chances. I think it was just a, blip in the pan. There is one thing though. San Diego State now has lost 3 games when leading with 66 seconds or less. And they've lost 3 of those. That was the thing with San Diego State before Kawhi Leonard and things like that. They let a lot of games get away from them. There were some really bad losses. It seemed to be kind of going back to that. So we'll see how the rest of the season for San Diego State goes. But for the Mountain West, I think they have a real good shot of maybe getting 3 teams in. I think they get 2 in unless something crazy happens. But I do think Boise will probably end up winning the conference tournament and getting that automatic bid. And then more than likely, whoever kind of is that other team in the final between Colorado State or Wyoming would get it. Now, once again, if San Diego State kind of figures out a way to take down Boise, that could be really rough, because then the committee will use that against them, and then maybe Mountain West only gets one team in, which would be the automatic qualifier. But those teams don't really care about the whole of the conference when they're trying to make it into the tournament. So.
Yeah. Another thing to keep in mind as you look at the Aztec schedule, they close out pretty easy, if you want to call it that. They've got San Jose State on Friday. They've got next Thursday, it's going to be Fresno. The part of their schedule, their closeout schedule that turns me is they are going to be on the road in Nevada on March the 5th. They're going to be on the road in Wyoming on Monday. The reason that concerns me is they're not playing well on the road this year. They're 3-5 on the road right now. And that's in the back of their heads, or if anybody's really paying attention. Let's see what happens on Monday when they get out there. Maybe Wyoming this time it'll be a different story, but throughout the season, you fly into wherever you fly into in Wyoming, and it's not like the stadium's right across the street like you're in. You get on the bus and you go, and I imagine it's going to be a balmy 17 degrees when they get there and snow all over the place. It's just a different environment.
It is. Yeah, you hit that on the head.
I imagine they'll come back to San Diego for a bit.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and then after the Nevada game, they come back to San Diego for a bit, I think, unless they opt to keep them in Nevada, because their tournament's going to start, I believe, the following.
Yeah, I definitely the logistics of the Mountain West airport to campus or airport to arena, that might be a read enough for all of y'all if you want to. And Wyoming might not be the worst. I know New Mexico is pretty rough, apparently. Colorado, now I've flown into Denver Airport. You see the funnel clouds in the background and everyone just kind of goes, oh, no big deal. And then, you get into that airport. And if you haven't gotten lost in the Denver International Airport, you're a liar, because that place is very easy to get lost. But it's true. I don't even know if they land in Wyoming, to be honest. It may very well be, hopping over. And once again, I'm not a geographic nerd or anything like that. But it is always difficult. There are always the quote unquote, oh, they didn't land until 2 a.m, or, they haven't been able to, get to the hotel until X in the morning because of this or that. That always happens in these trips, it seems like, to Wyoming. And we're already, like I said, seeing that type of fatigue. But San Diego State could still get the job done. It just probably not something you'd want to bet on. But looking ahead through the next week, we have a great slate of games, some really good ones. We are, of course, recording on the 24th of February. So it'll be a Thursday. So tonight, 3 big ones. Raider Jim already mentioned the Gonzaga Bulldogs at San Francisco, UCLA at Oregon, and Ohio State at Illinois. Saturday, as always, ton of great basketball. Purdue at Michigan State, Kentucky at Arkansas, Auburn at Tennessee, Wisconsin taking on those pesky Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Maybe the best game on this entire list, Kansas at Baylor, Arizona at Colorado. Colorado's having a good year as well. Creighton heading to Providence. Look, if you're expecting Providence to start to crumble, this is the time. So you better, if you're expecting it, this would be the game. Then, of course, Gonzaga at St. Mary's, a big week for Gonzaga. USC, who's kind of fallen off a bit, they'll be at Oregon. And then a good one on Sunday. Raider Jim brought up Houston, who's kind of been tumbling a bit. Well, they'll get a chance to kind of catch their breath. They'll host SMU, who's another really good team. Monday, we get to see Baylor again as they go to Texas, the Longhorns. The other big one Monday night, San Diego State heads to Wyoming, the game we just mentioned. And then Tuesday, a lot of eyes will be on, of course, Providence and Villanova meeting again. Second time in like 2 weeks, these teams will be meeting. Purdue at Wisconsin, maybe the 2 best teams in that conference. And then a big one finishing up Tuesday night, Arizona at USC. Arizona, of course, as of right now, that 1 seed according to that and that top 16. So Raider Jim, I know you got your eyes definitely on tonight with San Francisco hosting your Zags, and then of course Gonzaga heading to Moraga to face St. Mary's. What else you got? What else caught your attention?
Saturday, I can't wait to see what he does. Tennessee's at home against Auburn, and Tennessee's sitting at number 17 right now. It's a statement game for them. They've obviously done well. They're in the top 25. They did drop a spot last week, but they play strong against Auburn, and Auburn has shown some weaknesses and vulnerabilities in the last couple of weeks. They've done anything to really hurt their ranking, but they've just shown that they can be beat. I also would like to see Rutgers out and take care of Wisconsin again, because I believe that was one of the 4 games that they had when they had their great run. They had already taken care of business once with that team. And then all SMU and Houston, because I hit on that. SMU, they can make a statement here if they take care of Houston. And wow, gonna be a weekend for basketball. And I don't think Baylor will have too much to worry about against Texas. But again, these are the games, and it's Texas at home. They love nothing more. This is an interstate battle. Everybody wants to beat Baylor, so that's going to be a good one to watch. Those 2 games, San Diego State, Wyoming, Baylor, Texas, great Monday night basketball.
Yeah, there's really, this is kind of the time of year we're starting to kind of see the strength rising to the top, and you're getting a good idea of what's going on. I think Arkansas is a team, the Kentucky-Arkansas game, I'm a little kind of surprised Arkansas hasn't been on, I think, a little bit more people's radars. I mean, they obviously think they were the first team to I know they beat Auburn. I don't know if they were the first one to beat them, but I know they beat Auburn. They had a really good year. They've been recruiting well in the SEC, but I think for the Pac-12 as well, with Arizona having big games at Colorado and at USC, this is a big, big test for them. There's a very good chance, I think, the committee is looking at Arizona, and whether it's conscious or not, when you think Arizona, for better or worse, you at least for me, I can't help but think of the Sean Miller saga and things like that. Do they get penalized? Is that kind of in the subconscious of people? I wouldn't be surprised if there are some people in the NCAA who are rooting for them to fail, not maybe the players, but the program. That might be a bit conspiracy theorist on my side, but if Arizona does stub their toe, I think this is the week that it would happen. So keep an eye on those 2. And then, of course, always have my eye very close to Villanova, one of the more up and down teams all season, a team that I think should be performing much better than they are, but they are still, as of right now, a top 10 team. But that big matchup against Providence, that's going to be a good one. It's going to be a little tough for me because I have a soft spot for Providence as well. But of course, Nova is one of my big ones that I follow, of course, with the Philly schools. So Raider Jim, final thoughts for this edition of In the Paint.
What a great time of year, especially if we're going to have a delayed start to spring training and Major League Baseball. There is no football. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to the last 2 Gonzaga games, crossing my fingers that they will continue to take care of business, and I can get my next t-shirt that says undefeated.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback kind of on what you said. You must have read my mind with, of course, spring training should have, would have, could have. Nope, not could have, but should have started by now, will not. Now we've been told, we're 4 days away from the 28th of February, and Major League Baseball has come out and said, if we don't get a deal done by the 28th of February, we're not playing 162 days, 162 games. I am going to stay on my soapbox for just one more moment. I got to tell you, the audacity of Major League Baseball in the same 2-day period to cancel spring training games and then drop every team's spring training hat in the pro store. Woo, the cojones of Major League Baseball to just kind of spit in the face of all baseball fans to say, hey, you're not going to probably see a ton of spring training, but here's a hat that they would have worn. Can we have $35 for it? Yeah, that's where we are, folks. But to piggyback on that, I want to talk about, look, you're a baseball fan. We have a great opportunity. ESPN, Fox, and things like that, they need to fill these times. They've already come out and said we're going to start showing college baseball. College baseball is a lot of fun. It's not nearly as, I mean, we saw Long Beach State go from unranked to number 12 just in a week, things like that. True freshmen out of NC State hitting 5 home runs in a 3-game span. It is really magical. And the reason I'm bringing it up on this podcast is because it's very similar. Look, I am a basketball fan. I really couldn't tell you who's in first place in the NBA right now, or in the NBA West or the East. I watch a little bit of the All-Star game. That's not really my thing. College basketball is my thing because the emotion and all that. Well, I'm starting to fall in love or fall back in love with college baseball because of that. You know, doesn't look like we're going to get pro baseball anytime soon. So I think for me, I'm just going to enjoy the college baseball and the experience and the ease of watching it. Cause it was never, oh, I'm not going to watch it. It was, I don't have that channel. But now, hey, guess what? It's right there. So, and I implore all of you, if you are a baseball fan and you're feeling a little down, you know, cause I'll be honest, it won't hit me until the national championship game has happened for college basketball, to be honest, because that's how my sports calendar works. Super Bowl, college basketball, to March Madness, right into baseball. Well, if we don't have that, that's going to be a problem. But we are looking like we are going to have March Madness, and that's really all that matters when it comes to this podcast. So thank you again for listening, and thank you, Raider Jim, as always, for contributing. And it is thank you on behalf of the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Take care.